Hello, my amazing artists. So today we are going to be starting your new project. And we are going to be focusing on yet another element of art. So far we have talked a lot about color, and color is a very important element of art. We've worked with that color wheel, we've worked with those complementary colors, so using that color wheel, that tool. So we're going to be focusing on another element of art, as well as continuing our focus on colors and groups of colors in particular. So for this project, the two elements that we're focusing on, color, like I said, and space. Now, you guys have learned about space with me in class before, but what I want you guys to understand with this project is in art, there are a few different ways that the element of art, space, can be used. One way is what we kind of talked about in kindergarten, where we made those little snowy covered hills. And that is where you're looking at how close or how far something is from you. And so things that are further away in what we call the background are much smaller. And things that are closer to you get much bigger. It would be very similar to if I moved closer to my camera, I get bigger. If I move farther away, I get slightly smaller. You see more of me, but I get smaller in terms of things like my face, my head. You're not quite seeing it as large. So that is one way to interpret and describe space. Another is through what we call positive and negative space. Positive space is the space that an object occupies. For instance, I am currently taking up space. You can't move through me, right? And if you were to draw a picture with me in it, I would be what is considered positive space because I am taking up a portion of that artwork. The other form of space is what we call negative space, and that's the opposite. So negative space is the space around an object. So that would be all of that space in that artwork that a lot of times we want to leave blank. So think of all those times in art class where you've heard me say, can you color in the background so we're not just leaving white paper? That's your negative space. All right. Now I have just a very short video that I want to show you guys that is going to show you a few artworks, famous artworks that that focus on positive and negative space. And then for our project, we're going to be using positive and negative space through a painting, a drawing, and a cutout. So we have a lot of different things going on. Now, I told you that we're going to be focusing on two elements of art, though. The other element of art is color. Now, we've already talked about our color wheel this year. You guys have learned about primary colors, secondary colors, the color of the rainbow. You know a lot about colors. We've also just finished a project where we were working with complementary colors, or those colors opposite of each other, on the color wheel. So for this project, we're going to use two new groups of colors. And those colors are warm colors and cool colors. And we've done a little bit with these in the past, but we're going to focus a little bit more. Now, warm colors are those colors that make you feel warm and cozy. Think of things that feel hot, and then think of the colors you might associate with them. Colors like yellow, orange, red. So things like when I think of the sun, I think of that yellow color. When I think of fire, I think of that red and that orange. So those are things that remind me of heat, warmth. And so those colors help to emphasize those, and they are therefore called warm colors. Cool colors, on the other hand, are those colors that might be a little bit cooler feeling. If I were going to create an artwork based off of wintertime, more than likely I'm going to be using lots of blues and greens and purples in order to make that artwork feel a little cooler. If I were to create that same artwork with my warm colors, it's just not going to feel like wintertime. All right. So we are going to be working with our warm colors and our cool colors, as well as positive and negative space. So I want you guys to go ahead and watch these videos, and then we will come back and talk about exactly what we're going to do for our project. All right, everybody, so we've kind of watched our little videos. We've seen some artworks that show some examples of those positive and negative spaces, and we are going to be working on something very similar. So we are going to create a painting using our warm and cool colors, and then we are going to draw an outline of a leaf. So I happen to have this little kind of leaf right here. Perfect for fall weather, as all those leaves are falling. If you're working at home, you can grab, an image of a leaf, or you could go outside and find a really pretty leaf that you like, and use that as your inspiration. So I'm going to use this leaf right here as my inspiration for my picture. You are also going to need, material-wise, a piece of paper. My paper is 9 by 12. It's one of our big pieces of paper that has just been cut in half. And a piece of black construction paper. Again, same size, 9 by 12. That's that kind of average size of our construction paper. You're going to need a pencil. And then you're going to need some watercolors. Now, if you are working at home and you don't have watercolors, it's okay. Grab some washable markers. And you guys can use that little kind of painting technique that I showed you with the washable markers, where you color with your markers and then just run a brush with just a tiny bit of water over top of it. What that does is it's going to pick up that ink and almost give you your very own watercolors with markers, so painting with markers. So there's definitely materials that we can use if you do not have access to watercolors. Now, if you're working at school, you should have your watercolor palette with you guys. And we are going to get started with our painting first. All right, here we go. All right, everyone. So we have our paper. I've got my paint sitting here. The first thing we need to do before we do anything else is, of course, the same thing we always do, write your name and teacher code. So I'm going to write my name. And, of course, think about what that teacher code is. First letter of your teacher's first name, and your grade level. Now, if you are in Miss Weethy's class, or Miss Wright's class, make sure you're using the first two letters, so either WE-2 or WR2. Once you have your name and teacher code, we are going to actually be painting on the opposite side of our paper. Now, we are going to end up painting this entire thing, but we want to be able to break it down into our two groups of colors. Those warm colors, red, yellow, orange, and our cool colors, blue, green, and purple. So the very first thing we're going to do is fold your paper in half. All right, so go ahead, fold that paper for me. Notice I folded it horizontally, or what a lot of people like to refer to as hamburger style. I like to refer to it as horizontal. Use those correct terms. And then unfold it. So now you have that crease down the middle. All that crease is for is to show us where one group of color ends and the other begins. And then the cool thing about this project is you are going to be painting with your warm colors on one side, cool colors on the other, but how you do that painting is completely up to you. You must use all three colors, all three of your warm or all three of your cool colors on that side, but you can choose how to paint it. You can paint it with stripes, you can paint it horizontally, vertically, you can paint it with blotches, completely up to you. So I have my colors over here. I'm going to just use this side of my water palette. This is my primary and secondary colors. This over here, more of what we call our intermediate and tertiary colors. Those are like yellow, orange, red, orange. So if you have one palette, great, you're using those colors. If you have a double palette, I'm going to stick to these colors over here. You can venture over here, but some of them get a little muddled up as you start to get things like red violet. That's a warm color and a cool color. And then, of course, watercolors require water. So get your water, get your brush wet, grab a color, and start painting. I think for mine, I'm going to paint stripes. So I want to paint the entire thing in. If it gets on a table, we can clean it up. Watercolors are washable, but paint as neatly as you can. Remember, when you go to change your color, wash your brush, give it a bath. You still need water, so don't dry it. And get your next color. The nice thing about your warm colors, they all blend very well together. So if you go over, for instance, that red with your orange just a little bit, it creates that intermediate color, that red-orange, and looks very nice and kind of blends it together. The same thing will happen with my yellow and my orange. So I wash my brush and I get yellow. If I paint over my orange with my yellow a little bit, I create this kind of yellow-orange in the middle here. If you are noticing that your watercolors, your colors look very, very light, then it probably means you have too much water on your brush. The less water on the brush, the darker the paint. The more water on your brush, the lighter the paint. So as I'm working here, you can see that really distinct line between my red and my yellow. But what I could do if I wanted to blend those a little bit more is come back and get a little bit more yellow on my brush, and then take that yellow and paint over my red just a touch. And what you're going to notice is I ended up actually mixing my colors together, and I created that orange. And it helps my colors to blend. Now be very careful not to leave any puddles on your paper as you are painting, especially because we don't have a drying rack in our room. We don't want to pick these up and have paint and water go all over the floor, all over that carpet. So you want to make sure that you are spreading that water out. So if you notice little puddles, go back, spread it out, and then just continue painting until you are done with that group of color. Notice I'm kind of creating a pattern here. And I'm painting all the way up to that crease and then stopping. And just like I did before, I'm going to come back with that yellow, blend those colors here. That's just something I'm choosing to do. You do not have to do that. I just like the way that it looks. Now, once you have finished painting your warm colors, you're going to move into your cool colors. So again, your green, your blues, and your purples are your cool colors. Now I want you to be very careful when you are painting your cool colors. A couple things can happen. One, be careful right here on that seam, because if your colors, your warm and your cool colors mix here, certain colors will create brown. So I ended up with red here. The best colors for me to paint right up against that red are going to be blue or purple. Blue, because if I mix blue and red together, if they happen to blend together, they'll create a purple. Purple, because red helps make red. If I were to paint green here, and that green and the red mix, they're going to make a brown. And I don't really want that, all right? The other things you need to be careful of, again, kind of similar to that, is use that color wheel, that knowledge you have of that color wheel, and think about how colors mix. We know that blue is used to make green and blue is used to make purple. However, green is blue and yellow, purple is red and blue. And so if you mix green and purple together, you're again going to get a kind of muddied brown color. So you might want to keep purple in between, separating those two colors. All right, again, wash that brush anytime that you go to change colors, and then start painting your cool colors. You're going to notice, like mine, your purple at first may appear to be a little bit more pink. The darker you're able to get that purple, the more purple it looks. When you mix your cool colors, that blue and that purple mixing together creates your indigo. You can kind of see that color coming in just a little bit here. You get that kind of darker blue. That's that indigo that you guys learned about when we did Mr. Roy G. Biv. When you mix green and blue, you get almost that teal color. which I find beautiful. It's one of my favorite colors. So again, your colors mix very well together here, as long as you're not mixing that green and purple together. Now, because, unlike with my last one, because I don't want to mix green and purple, I'm actually going to do a slightly different pattern. I did purple, blue, green. Now I'm going to do blue again. So my blue's kind of be on either side of my green with that teal in between. And then I'm going to add my purple on the other side. Little bit of blue, because I do want a little bit more green in here. Just enough that I can now get my green and finish off my artwork with that green. All right, now once we have that done, you leave it to dry, and we'll come back once it's all dry and we will be adding our drawing of our leaf. All right, friends, so after our artwork has dried for the day, we are going to be drawing our leaf onto our artwork. Now, there are a couple different ways that you can do this. One, of course, use those leaf kind of handouts that you have. Look on a screen at some different images of leaves. There are a ton of different styles of leaves. Find a leaf outside if you have the ability to do that. I'm going to be using this little leaf here. This is not a real leaf, it's a fabric leaf. And I have some of those available as well as inspiration. But we want to draw it large enough that it fills up our page. So again, my leaf happens to have these three main parts to it. You might find a leaf that has more. Try staying away from a leaf that is just one singular leaf. We want this to be what we call symmetrical, meaning kind of the same on both sides. So in order to do that, if you would like, you can always fold that paper, kind of like I'm doing here. Fold that paper back in half, all right? And then think about what just half of your leaf might look like. So in this case, that leaf would look, very much like this. Those kind of two parts. Find the seam of your artwork. So in this case, my seam, I'm going to put it over here. And then you would draw just half of your leaf. Now, if you don't feel comfortable doing that, you can, of course, leave your paper open and draw the whole thing. But it might be a little bit more difficult to get it more symmetrical. It also may be more difficult to get it larger. I find it easier to draw large when I have a smaller bit of paper. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start mine with my pencil, get my drawing in, and then I'm going to come back with a Sharpie so that you can definitely see it. My suggestion for you, work with that pencil. That way if you need to erase something, you can erase and then cut it out. You do not have to trace yours with a Sharpie. All right, so I'm going to start with my leaf up here at the top. Again, I'm using my leaf right here as my inspiration. I'm going to come down. I have this little jut out right here on both sides, so I'm going to add that in. Gives it a little bit more kind of just detail. As I get down here, I'm going to come back, draw the second portion of my leaf. Notice I'm going all the way out here to the edge of my paper because I want this leaf as big as possible. I'm not keeping my lines perfectly straight either. My lines are kind of rounding out. And then I'm coming down here to the bottom. And if I want, I can add that little kind of stem at the bottom. Now, so you can see what I did because it's a little difficult to see with that pencil. I'm going to use that Sharpie and I'm going to kind of just go over my lines. So again, you can kind of see where I've made some jagged little lines. They're not all perfectly straight. And that just gives it a little bit more what we call realism. Makes it look a little bit more realistic than if they were just perfect lines. I came down here. Now, here is a super important part. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to cut our image out. So we're going to grab some scissors, and keeping our paper folded, I'm going to cut this out. Now I want to be very careful when I cut, because I am going to need both parts of the paper. The inside, what I'm cutting out, and the outside. So don't cut this portion off. Be very gentle, very careful as you're cutting. Again, notice I'm cutting it all in one piece. This is very, very important here, and I'll show you why in just a second. So I'm cutting this out. And remember, we're focusing on that positive and negative space. So if I were to look at what the positive space is and what the negative space is in this artwork, my leaf would be considered positive space because it's an object that's taking up space. And then this background area right here would be my negative space. So again, this is important. What I want you to do, cut those two sides across, and then open your leaf up, and on the crease, I want you to cut that in half as well. And you might be thinking, what in the world? We just spent all this time making this beautiful leaf, and now we're going to cut it up? That's because we want to show that positive and negative portion of our artwork. So once it's cut in half, and cut it nice and neatly so you get it nice in half, this is where we're going to grab that black paper. Write your name on your black paper. Pencil should be fine. Kind of creates a silver color, or if you have a white crayon, you can use that instead. And then you're going to determine which side you want to use for your positive space and which side you want for your negative space. So for mine, my leaf over here has got that kind of black outline around it, which I'm not loving, but so does my space over here. And I can see I didn't cut quite as neatly right here. So I think I'm going to use my cool colors as my negative space. And if you notice, that paper fits nice and neatly here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, and as carefully as I can, I'm ultimately going to be gluing this down. Then I'm going to take my positive side, so my warm color side, yours could be flipped, and I'm going to be lining these up together so that I have two parts. Now, I have an extra, so I could ultimately create two artworks like this. If you have time, you could get that second piece of paper and create the opposite. Now I'm going to start with my negative space. All right, I'm going to carefully, so that nothing tears, I'm going to add some glue over the entire thing. Again, be careful, especially if you have a little thin area like I do. If it does tear, you just glue it in its proper place on that black paper. But if we can keep it from getting torn, then that's what we want. Be a little bit more careful than me so that hopefully you're not getting glue all over the table or on the front. It will dry clear, but it's not as neat as I wanted it. That's okay. Line it up with the edge of the paper, just like you see me doing here. Line up all edges nice and neatly. And then massage that paper down into the black construction paper. So I now have my negative space is very colorful. My positive space is done in black. I'm going to come back, same thing, only this time I'm using my leaf that I cut out, that positive space, and it's going to be completely opposite. This time, on this half of my paper, my positive space is going to be colorful, and my negative space is going to be black. Very similar to some of those artworks that we saw in our video. So this is where you want to really line that up. Think about where those lines should go. Massage that in. If you have any little areas that were not getting glued down well, like for instance this little section right here, add a little extra glue. massage that in. And you have your positive and negative spaced leaf. Again, if you get done early, you could ask for a second piece of black paper, and you could do the same thing just opposite, whereas with your kind of scraps here so that you waste very little, or you could even do it on the back side of the paper, where on this one you would have your cool color be your positive space and your negative space be your warm color. So it's just the opposite effect. And that, my dears, is it. You would have your finished product. And it looks really neat. You have your warm colors, you have your cool colors, you have your positive space, you have your negative space. And it's really kind of two artworks in one. All right, I cannot wait to see what these look like when I get back. Have fun.